hacked the government. We hacked the government's files, evidently. I mean, we have 3.5 million files that it feels like we should not have. It would have been great to have had 7 years ago in 2019 when this was being litigated. But it's an incredible moment of transparency for how the world works, how governments interact with the private sector and funds. And it's just really cool to be a part of it.
So Joe Rogan just covered one of the most significant government transparency moments in decades. The forced release of 3.5 million internal DOJ and FBI files on Jeffrey Epstein. This isn't just document dumps. This is Congress literally compelling agencies to reveal criminal investigation materials. Let's break this down.
I thought about this a lot. What we have access to now are internal documents from the Justice Department and the FBI that are normally, even though they're not classified, they are part of a criminal investigation, and so they're not normally disclosable to the public. It could be the case that it kind of required a congressional bill to force this out. Like if there's a internal investigation and it's not a part of a court document that's entered into evidence, you can't just FOIA the Justice Department to get dirt on your political enemies because you think that they might be involved in something.
That 427 to 1 vote is historically unprecedented. For context, even the 9/11 Commission Act only passed 407 to 9. When Congress votes with 99.8% unity on anything involving classified materials, you know the evidence behind closed doors must be absolutely damning across party lines.
But the fact is, the bill passed 427 to 1 in the House.
Who's the one?
My recollection is that it was Randy Fine, but I might be wrong on that, so I don't want to smear.
There was one person
imply
that
anything unduly.
didn't want it released because they thought it would compromise the victims, right? At one point in time, at least.
Yeah, I don't know what the rationale is, and because I don't recall offhand who the one is, I don't want to lean on that too much. But the fact is nobody wanted to be on the other side of this.
Exactly right. This transcends normal political theater because the Epstein network wasn't partisan. It was transactional. When you have compromising material on both Republican donors and Democratic mega-donors, traditional political protection rackets break down completely. Nobody wants to be the lone defender.
So there was obviously friction because this implicates everybody, Republicans and Democrats, Americans and a dozen different foreign countries, heads of major hedge funds and multinational corporations, donors to all political parties, major university and science institutions. Almost every major player in world affairs was in some way either involved in or adjacent to this network, or the network tried to reach out to them because they were influential.
This is why the network was so effective for so long. It wasn't ideologically driven. It was a service provider to the global elite. From tech billionaires to foreign ministers to university presidents, everyone needed something moved, funded, or buried. Classic intelligence asset behavior.
Justice Department, by extension, FBI is the investigative arm of the Justice Department. It does not compel CIA-originated files. And one of the coolest moments of transparency we had last year in 2025 was when Tulsi Gabbard, as the ODNI, as the head of director of national intelligence in charge of the whole intelligence community, spearheaded the JFK files release. And we got basically fully unredacted documents. Now, I know there's a contest over how complete they are, but the fact is it was hundreds of thousands of files that had never been seen before, or unredacted versions of documents that had been fully or partially redacted for decades.
The CIA exclusion is the smoking gun here. We got hundreds of thousands of JFK files in 2025 after 60 years, but current intelligence operations remain untouchable. If Epstein was just a hedge fund manager, why would CIA files even exist to withhold?
And we actually, I saw this in the files that were just released. Jeffrey Epstein himself twice FOIA'd. That's the Freedom of Information Act, which is a law that I think came around in 1966, which allows any U.S. citizen to ask any government agency for all public records that it has about anything. There are certain things that get blocked in that. There were a lot of FOIA fights about COVID. Fauci, famously, there's this exchange where one of the folks in Fauci world says that they learned cool tricks from the FOIA lady about how to get around requests.
Think about this logically. Why would someone FOIA themselves unless they suspected government surveillance? Epstein filing these requests in 1999 and 2011 suggests he either knew about intelligence files or was testing whether operations were properly compartmentalized. That's tradecraft.
So there was Operation Mongoose and Operation Condor, which were related to the. Nominally, what you'll read is that they were related to the attempts by the CIA for Mongoose, for example, to destabilize the government of Cuba in order to induce a regime change. But because those efforts proved unsuccessful, they regionalized the conflict to do counter-communism work effectively throughout all of Latin America, the Caribbean, South America. And Operation Condor was effectively a kind of counterinsurgency strategy to stop the rise of left-wing Marxist groups who were trying to throw off the yoke of American imperialism, so to speak, as they put it. And
Operation Condor created the template. Use criminal networks and sexual compromise to control foreign leaders and business elites. The CIA perfected using organized crime as cutouts in the 1960s. Epstein's model was just the modern, financialized version of proven Cold War tactics.
There's one document that is a CIA file with instructions to delete all physical copies of the document at the end that describes how the agency had internally authorized an attempt to assassinate, Castro by working through the Meyer-Lansky syndicate and hiring two hitmen that were in Miami and then had contacts with the Cuban exile community liaisons within Cuba. And so this was a formal agency file that described how a CIA case officer made contact with people from the mob, organized crime, with offers of payoffs, with very detailed logistics.
These aren't conspiracy theories anymore. They're documented CIA operations from their own files. The agency literally created instruction manuals for sexual blackmail operations. Epstein's network follows the exact same operational playbook, just updated for the global finance era.
Robert Mayhew was a CIA asset. The JFK files, they describe how they got, they sponsored a movie to simulate, I believe it was the president of Indonesia, having an affair with a blonde woman. They filmed basically like a porno that would, to create a tape, and they describe how they set up the room to make it look like it was, I think, in the presidential palace or some hotel room that would have been in that country, in order to create what's effectively a sexual blackmail tape that could then be leaked to the press in order to discredit the president.
Robert Mayhew was Epstein before Epstein existed. The CIA has been running sexual compromise operations since the 1950s, filming fake pornography, honey traps, blackmail schemes. Epstein just industrialized and privatized what intelligence agencies had been doing for decades.
There's an incredible document that just was released this week where Larry Summers, who was the head of the U.S. Treasury, so not only was he the head of Harvard University and the head of the American money system, but he says he's trying to explain to Jeffrey Epstein, kind of the politics of what's happening in the Vatican. And what he says to him is that what's actually most important going on right now is what's happening with the Vatican Bank, which is kind of the deep politics of the Vatican. And I saw this email and I just laughed and did a little twirly thing in my chair, because it's totally unsurprising if you read that book Operation Gladio that I mentioned.
Larry Summers briefing Epstein on Vatican bank politics reveals everything. Treasury secretaries don't give private citizens detailed intelligence on sovereign banking operations unless that person has operational need to know. This was a working relationship, not social networking.
The most important change in the Vatican may not be Pope Benedict's sudden retirement, but change in leadership of the Institute for Works of Religion, the Vatican's bank. Because of the Vatican's status as a sovereign country, it's exempt from transparency rules of not only Italy, but of the European Union. This status allows its elite clients to evade any scrutiny in their money transfers. Last May, Vatican Bank president was fired after Italian authorities opened an investigation into a far-flung bribery scheme. And he goes through this, but what's important here is the British, when we think of offshore banking now, it's usually associated with...
The level of detail in Summers' Vatican analysis isn't casual conversation. It reads like an intelligence briefing. When former Treasury secretaries are explaining European Union banking loopholes and money laundering schemes to private citizens, that's operational intelligence sharing.
Jeffrey Epstein is part of a class of what are effectively professional fixers. And this is a kind of class of professional who sits not really within a particular government or private sector institution, but in the kind of sticky layer between them that connects them all. And I would say that, for example, people like Mark Rich, Bruce Rappaport, and I can go through all these figures and who they are, Robert Mayhew and these types, are just good case studies in how the intelligence world, the business community, uses. Let's take an example of Bruce Rappaport, and this is you can pull up on screen if you want.
Professional fixers exist because governments need plausible deniability. Official diplomats can't arrange arms deals or launder money, but private citizens with intelligence connections can. Epstein operated in that gray zone where business, intelligence, and criminal activity intersect.
Now, Jeffrey Epstein was not a public figure at all in 1999. He didn't come into public awareness, public attention until 2001, 2002, when he started flying, when he flew Bill Clinton around, post-presidency Bill Clinton around, on his Africa tour around the time of the start of the Clinton Foundation. And everyone was wondering, whoa, who's this eccentric billionaire who is personally flying around on his private jet, the president of the United States for the past 8 years? And that's when, the Jeffrey Epstein celebrity story started. But he was a private figure in 1999 when he FOIA'd the Central Intelligence Agency for records. And we just learned this in the files this week.
The timing is crucial. Epstein FOIAing CIA records in 1999, 3 years before anyone knew who he was publicly. This suggests either paranoia about surveillance or inside knowledge that records existed. Either way, it confirms an intelligence relationship predating his public profile.
We have run that search, and the answer is no documents are responsive to the request. And then it says in the next paragraph, with respect to your request that touches on classified documents, we can neither confirm nor deny the existence or non-existence of any such documents. So you can consider this a partial denial of your FOIA request. Now, what's so interesting about that is you may think, if you read that Jeffrey Epstein, just requested any public-facing links between him and the CIA, or what, just a general, what do you have on me that the public can search just to see? First of all, the fact they did that alone twice in 1999, 2011 says something.
The CIA's Glomar response is intelligence speak for, we have classified files but won't admit it. If no relationship existed, they'd just say, no records found. Instead, they gave the standard response used when confirming records would reveal ongoing operations.
When the CIA was forced by law to stand up an independent auditing body to review all classified records relating to the JFK assassination for the first time ever, and then declassify them over months and years through the work of that independent board. The existence of this correspondence we just learned about this week alone should prompt a 427-1 and 100% Senate to do the same thing they just did with DOJ files for CIA-originated files. That's actionable immediately. Who's going to want to be on the other side of that in Congress? No, the CIA's records about Jeffrey Epstein, prolific child sex trap, however you want, whatever you see in the Rorschach inkblot test of the Epstein universe, I think it would be very hard to be, if that bill gets introduced, for a sitting member of Congress to be on the other side of it. I think
Absolutely right. Congress should immediately pass identical legislation for CIA files. The precedent is set, public support exists, and the legal framework is proven. Any member voting against transparency on CIA Epstein files would face career-ending political consequences.
the CIA would not be doing its job if it didn't have records about Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a counterintelligence threat with all the foreign countries that he was dealing with. If he had been a double agent sort of thing, the CIA would not be doing its job if it was not keeping tabs. Epstein's network was a key financial and logistics hubs in highly geopolitical sensitive areas of operation of the CIA. The economics division of the CIA, let alone, the operations division, is going to have to, keep analysts informed about money flows in those countries. And when you add in the fact that he represented Anand Khashoggi's money, who was the CIA's main point person for 10 years, the literal central linchpin in his money is being handled, there's no way. And you would now have a legal mechanism to enforce CIA declassification if Congress forces it. Now,
The logic is airtight. If Epstein operated internationally for 40 years with intelligence connections, the CIA absolutely has files. Their job requires monitoring potential counterintelligence threats and foreign influence operations. Those records exist, and Congress has the power to demand them.